Hey folks, Phil the Bee Man here. I promised a few folks that I would talk a little bit about my bee inner covers or blankets actually. These are foam, bubble wrap things. I call them blankets, other people call them foamies, other people call them, well, I don't know what. And I mean, I don't know who started it. Maybe me. I remember it would have been in the 90s. I saw a company that was making winter wraps made out of this material, which was pretty new at the time. And I saw them at a convention and I thought, well, I don't winter my bees outside, but I can see where that would be useful. And so and the main thing I thought at the time was I want something that in the spring, once I've broken the lid loose on the hive, how do I get it to seal again until the weather warms up enough? The bees can't repropolize that joint, and so it ends up being kind of a bit of a draft under there, especially once I went to migratory lids. And so you got to think about these things in conjunction with the lid you're using. The lid I have is this migratory lid, covers front and back, and then a rim on the inside. Mine's 3/8, but it could be as much as 1/2 inch or more if you wanted. I have a feeder hole in the middle. And then when you put that blanket inside of that, and then that blanket sits on the hive, now you've got this compressible material that essentially forms a gasket and also has this reflective quality that will keep the heat down in the hive instead of losing it through the blanket. And I remember the first year I made these, I didn't have enough to cover all the hives, and there were the hives that didn't have them. You'd get a frost in the fall, and the minute it warmed up just a shade, the heat from the bees would melt the ice off the lids. The ones that had the blankets, the lid would not melt. Seems like a negative, but actually that showed how much difference in heat loss these things were confining. So that sold me on that these did save heat. When you're making them, you can buy that, what's now I think a pretty common building product, just about any hardware store would have it. Pretty important to do two things. One is you want it, if you don't have the hole between the blanket and the lid matched up, then the bees won't be able to feed. So you got to make sure every lid has that hole exact dead center, and then you got to make your foamy with that foamy or blanket with that hole also centered up so that the holes always line up. And when you're making the hole, I've tried a few strategies over the years. You can see that this one is made with a triangle cut, and then when you want to feed, you'd fold that over, and when you want to maximize your insulation, you would close it. That's a huge pain in the butt. And what happens over time is that triangle always, they do like to stick these things down a little bit. And so every time you pull it up, you get a little bit of tearing until eventually you've got more hole than you have blanket. And so when folks ask, how long do these things last? Well, it's not forever, I can tell you that. And we throw out lots every year, but not 10%. They must last 10 or 15 years overall. And I think I'm getting better at keeping them. Probably start with a fairly small hole so that, and now I just go with a straight circle hole that lines up with that lid. You can see that when I've got the lid open, you can see how, yep, they line up right through. And so you do lose a little bit of heat there, I'm sure, but you have the advantage of the seal all the way around and a lot of that heat reflected. When you're making the hole, oh, one more thing, you can get this material, I had one here somewhere, in kind of a triple, here it is. This is, my builder supply guy calls this double bubble. 2 layers of the foil wrap and then bubbles in between. He also has this what he calls triple, and it's actually a layer of bubbles and in middle layer, and it's actually quite stiff and probably has significantly more insulation. It's priced accordingly. Slightly cheaper is this reflective one side, and you can have debates with your family, just like the tin foil, shiny side in or shiny side out, probably doesn't matter, but it's a great thing to fight about. When you're making the hole, and I think I have one here I was going to demonstrate on, where did that go? Here we are. When you're making the hole, this is the best solution I've come up with yet, because I want to reduce that tearing. So first of all, you got to make sure that you've got that lined up. So use your template or whatever. I just use a sample lid. Mark your hole with a felt pen so you know where it is. And then I use my handy butane torch. Get just a nice modest flame going there. And then I only got one shot of doing this, but I want to melt the hole right through the middle. And when you do that, hopefully don't set it too much on fire, that extra material, instead of just being cut out, actually shrinks back and makes that edge somewhat stiff and a little tougher. And that does seem to reduce significantly the amount of tearing you get when you lift these blankets off of the top bars. The 10, you have a pretty good edge because the edge is, of course, past the edge of the box. So that doesn't tear as much. The worst wear and tear is on that center hole. And if you can use the heat method to shrink that hole out or cauterize that edge a little bit, I think you'll find that they last longer than if you just cut it with a knife and you have a ragged edge that's exposed to tearing over time. So that's the story for those. They've caught on. I don't think it's me. I think it's probably a lot of people seeing the same solution at the same time. But I think they work great for keeping your hives warm. And then in the summer, here in Manitoba, we have about 6 weeks of nice weather, and then all of a sudden it's too hot. And if you ever put your hand on a hive lid on a 30-degree day, you realize actually the bees are working pretty hard to keep that cool now. And so I leave my blankets on year-round. The time from when you're trying to keep your hive warm to when you're trying to help your hive stay cool, it's not worth hauling them all home and then hauling them all back again. So if you're from a warmer country or your warmer place and you think, well, I'd never use those, ask yourself how hot it is under that lid and whether that blanket would be right to you for that. All right, that's the story on the hive blankets. Use it, your mileage may vary. Use it as you see fit. Have a great day.